Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm seeing the numbers slow down. If you saw chat just come through from me, it's a reference document for today's presentation. We'll go into it in a few slides, but feel free to open it up. You'll definitely want to take a look at it when we get to that topic. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program Workshop. This is our second one for this cycle this year. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kayla Giese. I'm currently the program coordinator for the TCEP here at the CTC on Matthew Yozgat's team. And I'm going to turn it over really quick to my colleague, Ken Lopez, to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ken Lopez. I am the data specialist under the TCEP program. Thanks, Kayla.
Thanks, Ken. We can go to the next slide now. Just going to go over some quick workshop logistics before we get into today's agenda. So I'm sure most of you are probably pretty familiar with Zoom Night by now, but your comments and questions are of course welcome as part of each topic in this workshop. You should see the webinar control panel on the bottom of your screen. There you'll find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. Please use the raise hand feature as early onto a topic as you can to give us time to acknowledge you. Alternatively, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Please specify the item or topic that you're commenting on, and we will read the comment on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee and can create confusion for staff when making comments. And also just another reminder that we would really like you to introduce yourself if you come off mute to make a comment or have a question, and let us know what organization you're representing. Next slide, please, Ken. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're going over some familiar information from last workshop. So a lot of this will kind of be a recap, and then we are presenting some new zero emission, a matrix that we referred to in the last workshop. We have that in draft form in that PDF that's in your chat. And then we'll go over some workforce development language that we're updating. We're going to go ahead and do an office hours reminder with the information on that. We'll take questions and comments. We'll also have a recap discussion and then go over action items and next steps. Just another reminder, we do want to hear your feedback. So we want to hear your questions and comments today. And feel free to interrupt during a topic if you need to, raise your hand and we'll get to your question or comment. I'm going to turn it over to Ken to go over the next two slides, which are just a recap of TCEP eligibility for anyone that might be joining who's new to the program.
All right, thanks, Kayla. So the objective of the program is to fund public infrastructure projects, those that have a high volume of freight movement. Also, the objective is to support the goals of the National Highway Freight Program, the California Freight Mobility Plan, and also the guiding principles of the California Sustainable Freight Action Plan. The funding for the program is approximately $400 million a year. This is a mix of state and federal funds. Okay, next slide. The cities, counties, MPOs, regional transportation planning agencies, also known as RTPAs, port authorities, public construction authorities, and Caltrans, all of these agencies are eligible to participate in TCEP. The criteria for eligibility is that the project has to be included in a regional transportation plan. And if the project is within the boundaries of an MPO, it must be consistent with an approved sustainable community strategy. These are all project types that are eligible for the program. Those that enhance the freight system's economic activity or vitality, those that relieve congestion on freight system, also improve the safety and resilience of the freight system itself, those that improve the infrastructure, implement technology or any innovation to improve the freight system or to reduce or avoid its negative impacts. The project should also reduce or avoid adverse community and or environmental impacts to the freight system. Are there any questions on the slide before this one or this one? If not, I can turn it over back to Kayla so she can continue with the next slide.
Thanks, Ken. I'm not seeing any hands raised or questions coming in right now. Okay, so this slide might be a little familiar if you joined us for our first workshop. Today, we're just going to go over some draft evaluation criteria for zero emission projects that we're considering for cycle 4. The two bolded bullets are really what we're going over today. So we're thinking about incorporating a matrix that will designate what should be included for zero emission, medium, and heavy duty infrastructure projects versus non-zero emission projects. And again, that draft matrix is a part of the PDF that's in your chat. You should be able to see the full thing on that document. And that matrix also includes some new criteria that we are considering to evaluate zero emission, medium, and heavy duty infrastructure projects based on the work we did for SB 671. And just another reminder, freight throughput is still a key factor in evaluations, and projects that combine factors, including zero emission freight infrastructure, are the most competitive. Next slide, please, Ken. Another familiar slide from the first workshop. Again, just giving you a reminder of some of the criteria that we're considering adding into the guidelines for cycle 4. Some of these are included in that matrix that hopefully you're viewing now. So just a few of them to go over: number of electric chargers or hydrogen dispensers, proximity to residential neighborhoods, grid readiness, proximity to major routes, proximity to other charging refueling infrastructure. You'll see them listed in that matrix. Okay, next slide, Ken. So here on this slide is just a little snapshot of the draft evaluation matrix. And again, this will be to designate which criteria applies to zero emission projects versus non-zero emission projects. The entire matrix can be viewed on that attached document. This is really meant to be a guide for completing applications with the appropriate and relevant information to your project. And it doesn't mean that zero emission projects do not have to be competitive in all criteria areas. So we'd really like to hear your feedback on this specifically. On the left hand of your slide, you'll see that those new zero emission criteria are included in the matrix that we went over in the last slide. So really looking forward to if anyone has any comments or would like to discuss anything in this matrix. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew to see if he wants to add anything to this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. And hello, everybody. So yeah, I know in the last conversation we had mentioned wanting to share some material with you all up front, so you had an opportunity to go through it. As Kayla mentioned, she did drop the PDF that we're considering in the chat right now. A couple of things that I want to point out is, one, the primary purpose of this matrix right now is to guide potential applicants to which criteria are most applicable to their projects. However, it does not preclude a certain type of a project from needing to compete in a certain category. We know that that might be kind of a tricky concept right now, and we're kind of exploring how best to do that. But the main purpose right now is to not treat any projects differently from one another. We did have some sole zero emission infrastructure projects that were very competitive in cycle 3. So we still believe that they should be able to compete across the different criteria and still be competitive for funding. However, if you do look through this matrix, you'll notice that projects that are maybe grouped together with a zero emission infrastructure project would hit each of the criteria. So we're putting this out as hopefully a tool to make our evaluation process, or at least the criteria, I should say, a bit more straightforward for potential applicants. However, we're still considering ways to make the ZE infrastructure evaluation criteria a bit more robust. So I don't know that we're proposing a whole lot in that regard today, but we're willing to take any feedback we have from anybody in the audience.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm not seeing any hands raised yet or questions. I'll just give it a few more. There we go. We have a hand raised. I'll turn it over to Ken. You're on mute, Ken.
I don't see the hand. Let's see.
Oh, okay. I have it up here. Carrie Welsh, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name is Kerry Welsh. I'm part of TRC slash GNA. I just had a comment, and I'm not sure if you were requesting comments for just these three evaluation criteria that are on the screen or all of them in the matrix, but mine is for one that's lower down in the matrix, not one of these first three.
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, thanks. There's just one talking about the number of electric chargers or hydrogen dispensers, specifically how many chargers or dispensers will be on site. If it's chargers, what level are they? Level 2 versus level 3. I think it might just be helpful to dive a little deeper into that, or just place more emphasis on those higher power chargers instead of drawing the distinction between level 2 and level 3, saying, what is the exact power output of the chargers, as most level 2 chargers will not be suitable for supporting freight.
Thanks, Carrie. That's a really good comment. Definitely making note of that for us to consider. Ken, do we have any other hands raised or comments or questions?
We have one, someone's not able to, Patricia Chan is not able to open the file. So we could probably send it after the meeting.
Yeah, sorry about that, Patricia. If anyone else is having an issue, go ahead and let us know. I did check on the back end and it's being posted to our website right now, but you won't be able to access it because it's going through the accessibility check that it needs to go through.
Kayla, what I can also do is I think while we're talking, I can export a list of everybody's email and I can just send it out to the entire group as well. I know that,
Okay.
yeah, it was like asking me to save it. I was just trying to test it out. And so yes, Patricia, we can make sure we get this to you and the rest of the audience.
Thanks, Matthew. We can move on to the next question, Ken.
There's another question. So Angel Pyle from Caltrans has the question. Can you please explain further how a zero emission project would be evaluated on the throughput category? Does no mean that zero emission won't be evaluated against the category?
I'm going to turn over to Matthew for this question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we're saying is we are not expecting a ZE infrastructure project to be producing throughput. And so we're not necessarily excusing a ZE project from answering that question. But we're saying we understand that it would be difficult and probably unlikely that a ZE project could answer that question. So not to say that, if we evaluate a ZE project against a roadway project, that the ZE project is going to score 0 and that a roadway project will score something. We're not quite certain how that will work out, but then if you go further down the list, there are specific ZE criteria that obviously roadway projects would score nothing on and ZE projects would be getting ratings on. So I guess we're not suggesting you make something up for throughput. We're just acknowledging that, yes, throughput is not lended to a ZE infrastructure project. Velocity does not lend to a ZE infrastructure project.
Okay, we have one more question from Jez Manzi from San Mateo County Transportation Authority. He asked, for the proximity to residential neighborhood and other charging infrastructure, what are you considering positive, being closer or further away?
Matthew, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah. Pulling up that. Sorry, I was in the middle of trying to email this out to everybody. Give me one moment. So that's a good question. I think it kind of depends, right? So we clearly want to be routing traffic away from residential neighborhoods. However, I don't think we're suggesting that, you know, all ZE infrastructure projects will be able to, you know, be constructed outside or well outside of residential neighborhoods. You know, I think this will come into contact with our community engagement criteria, which suggests that there should be some community input and some assessment made on where the best location for that station would be. However, I would say generally, even though it might not always be feasible, the best proximity would be away from a residential community.
Thanks, Matthew. Ken, are you seeing any other questions or comments?
No questions or comments.
Carrie, I see your hand is still raised. Do you have an additional question?
Sorry, lowering it now.
Okay, thank you. No problem. Okay, any more feedback on this topic? And feel free to reach out to us later too via email or phone call and let us know what your thoughts are. Again, I know that we didn't really give you a big lead time on reviewing this before the workshop, so we're happy to take your feedback afterwards if needed, or keep reviewing it and we'll have some time for questions and comments at the end of the workshop also. We can go to the next slide, Ken. Okay, so kind of our last topic in today's workshop is this proposed workforce development language update that we'll be making or we're considering. This is on pages 15 through 17 of the current 2022 TCEP guidelines, just for reference. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we are removing that language that already exists and adding kind of a more streamlined paragraph to reflect the new zero emission criteria. So this will say, recipients of the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program funds that involve the installation of electric vehicle infrastructure must meet the following requirements. Be installed by a contractor with the appropriate license classification as determined by the contractor's state license board, and at least one electrician on each crew at any given time holds an electric vehicle infrastructure training program certification, and meet a requirement that at least 25% of the total electricians working on an electric vehicle infrastructure project, installing a charging port, supplying 25 kilowatts or more at any given time, hold electric vehicle infrastructure training program certification consistent with the Public Utilities Code. So again, just kind of streamlining the language that we had in there, since we are adding in some new zero emission criteria or considering it. So happy to hear any feedback on this. Also, I see that Joe has his hand raised, so maybe we'll turn it over to him to hear his comments. Hang on, Joe, I'm unmuting you. There you go.
Oh, thank you, Kayla. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and thank you for your service. My name is Joe Sullivan. I work for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 11, and the National Electrical Contractors Association of Greater Los Angeles. This represents about 350 electrical contractors that partner with 10,000 electricians. And so I really appreciate the commission and staff's desire to create high-road careers with TCEP funding. With that in mind, I want to encourage you to add this proposed language to the guidelines. This electric vehicle infrastructure training program, or EVITP, certification of electrician, is has a lot of precedent. It's consistent with Public Utilities Code 740.20, and it's been adopted by the California Air Resources Board, California Energy Commission, the CPUC, Southern California Edison, cities like Los Angeles, Long Beach, ports of LA, ports of Long Beach. There's quite a few other entities as well. This program ensures quality and safety of installations in an industry rampant with non-functioning EV infrastructure. It's estimated that 1/3 of EV chargers are down at all times. And while this is not a union program, it's open to all electrical contractors. By requiring a dedicated workforce, this will create a dedicated trained workforce. this will create better careers, and these careers can include, no cost apprenticeship training, job placement, family sustaining wages and benefits, and long-term career pathways. And so I appreciate what you're doing here, and I just want to encourage you to adopt this. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I actually saw a question come in that Joe might be a good resource for, actually. I'll go ahead and read this one, Ken. From Jess, do you know how many electricians have this certification, wanting to make sure that the capacity exists within the state to deliver projects? Joe, is that a stat maybe that you have off the top of your head?
I do not have it off the top of my head, but I can send you a link at the evitp.org. It lists all the electricians, but a study was done by EVITP, and I can also get you that shows there are more than enough EVITP certified electricians to install all the charging infrastructure needed over the next 10 years. We have enough certified today for the next 10 years, where the numbers go way up.
Thank you, Joe. Would you mind putting a link to that website in the chat for everyone?
Sure. The study, I think I only have by hard copy. I don't think I have a web-based version, but I will.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
You can send it.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
And
so
Kayla, I just wanted to thank Joe really quick. We appreciate all the contributions you've made to our guidelines. You were also very important in co-creating a lot of the language we had for cycle 3. So yes, we appreciate your partnership, on working through this language.
Thank you very much. Happy to help.
thanks, Matthew. Okay, so any other questions or comments on this topic? Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Ken, gonna double check with you. Do you see any hands raised or questions? You're on mute, Ken.
Of course. Yeah, Joe wrote in the link to EVITP, so everybody should be able to see it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's under the Q&A, the chat.
Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have function access to the chat.
Okay, we will add it to the chat. Thanks, Ken. I think we can go ahead and move on to the next slide then.
Okay, let's see.
So again, another kind of repeat from last workshop. These are just some proposed topics that we are thinking about for future TCEP workshops in this cycle. Some clarifying language about supplemental funds in the guidelines just to make it a little more reader friendly. Additional considerations regarding climate resilience, protections for natural and working lands, and public health. And then zero emission criteria and topics continued. We're definitely open to going over the matrix again and any of this zero emission criteria that we've proposed as needed. And then a reminder also that we are focusing on our SB1 programs advancing transportation equity workshop. So that is scheduled for March 27th, 1 to 4 p.m. That will be all SB1 programs included in that. And I believe the link to register has gone out. I think that it's on our website. So mark that on your calendars. I'll pause here also to see if anyone has thought since our last workshop of any additional topics that you'd like us to consider for following workshops.
Kayla, I'm gonna make a quick plug for the March 27th workshop, if you don't mind. So
yeah.
For those of you who don't necessarily participate in our other program workshops, or maybe weren't tuned into our Equity Advisory Committee meeting back in February, we're really looking forward to revamping some of the language we have currently, not only in our SB1 competitive programs supplement, equity supplement, which we included in cycle 3, but also reconsidering how we evaluate community engagement. Do we have the right words on the page for what our applicants are able to provide? Is there anything we can do to enhance that? And as you know, well, maybe you don't know, but I'm telling you now, all three of our competitive SB1 programs utilize the same criteria when it comes to community engagement. And so that's why we're really treating this as kind of a group effort to make sure that we're making consistent changes across the three programs. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the save the date into the chat for the registration for the March 27th workshop, but I do anticipate a robust conversation. You know, we may have a couple EAC members who are participating as well, and particularly for those of you who either practice, you know, positive community engagement in your communities, or you know, implement it at regional or local jurisdictions. We are really hoping to get any feedback. So I might also drop a link to the existing equity supplement into the chat as well, so that folks who might not be familiar with it can at least take a look at what we currently have, because that is the document we're seeking to update to ultimately, you know, continue funding projects that produce the most equitable of outcomes. So I would say that this is kind of the primary, you know, primary change we're seeking to make in the three programs this upcoming cycle, as well as any changes that we're already discussing with you or that you see on the screen. So I'll see if there's any questions or comments.
Ken, I think I see a hand raised.
I don't see, okay, there we go. Oh, there was okay. I don't see okay. Carrie has a question. Where can we find the link to register for the March 27 event? Is that
I hopefully just put it in the chat. So I'm hope if you look at that save the date, you'll notice 4 dates on there, and then the March 27th is our equity workshop.
I'm gonna go ahead, and it looks like Scott Strzelecki has his hand raised. So Scott, you should be able to unmute and speak now.
Yeah. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. So I just have a question that I think, you know, something maybe to consider is basically when we think about kind of like traditionally how the TCEP program has functioned, you know, and the focus of it, like through legislation, et cetera, you know, we've typically had kind of a dynamic of who the lead agency is, you know, based on the region, based on Caltrans for the state, all these sort of things. So when we start thinking about zero emission infrastructure, like kind of, you know, the potential of it transcending these areas and the kind of the guidelines of how it has to be within an approved regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy. I think, you know, we just need to think about kind of what that means relative to the timing of how these documents are updated. We're currently in a process of completing our document. Hopefully, I think April, it'll be approved. And then obviously we have amendment processes after the fact as a part of that. But, you know, I guess I'm trying to understand better, like, you know, if there's something that's within a local jurisdiction's control, like a port project, they have their facility that they operate, right? That's a project that the port would sponsor and move forward. If there's another project that's, you know, in a local jurisdiction or in a, you know, whatever, whoever's jurisdiction, if it's a, you know, in a highway right of way, or whatever it could be, you know, just how are we kind of thinking about how these projects that could not be to a degree developed or accounted for, like what does the transition look like? And then to that point further, as AO, you know, we have to kind of list all the projects in our region. We have to do the you know, confirming consistency with the long range plan, and just the process of, you know, what type of projects are we really getting into? Are we getting into public-private partnerships? Who's kind of leading the project? How is this information being disseminated, right? So these are just things that I'm kind of thinking about as we're talking through this. Like, how do we think about all that from a timing perspective of where we are with our current process of updating our plan versus where we're headed to nominating projects and us performing our role as the MPO, et cetera.
Scott, I'll go ahead and I think that's more of a comment, not so much of a question. And I just want to say, we're very understanding, and I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. I think in cycle 3, it was kind of trial by fire in terms of exploring this space. I know that, funding ZE infrastructure was not really spelled out in our cycle 2 guidelines, and then it became spelled out in cycle 3, and we saw some of our first ZE projects, ZE infrastructure projects submitted for consideration. And actually a small handful of those were successful in being funded, but we do know how challenging it was, not only for those, private companies that are manufacturing the zero emission infrastructure facilities, but the city governments, the county governments, the regional transportation planning agencies, the MPOs, who were partnering with them. I think we even had a couple of air districts that were able to partner with some of those projects. So we're very sensitive to the lead time. I think maybe the one bit of reaction that I have would be, we are not planning to make our requirements more stringent on ZE projects. Obviously, there are very strict statutory rules in the TCEP program that will require things such as projects being listed in a regional transportation plan, projects being nominated by a public agency. However, I think the changes that we're currently proposing, even if they're not all in front of you today, are really just to make the process a bit more straightforward and easy to follow. Certainly not to complicate the matters or, ask our, public partners or private partners to jump through more hoops. I think, I do understand that I know that there's some potential legislation out there that could kind of change things around a little bit if it were to be passed. But as we're currently I would say implementing this cycle 4 guidelines development, I think we're just really trying to put the message out there that these are the types of things our partners need to consider. Having folks like you, Scott, I think, vocalize the challenges that MPOs are facing. And I mean, especially, if SCAG is having issues, I'm sure some of our smaller partners are having some challenges as well. So we're really just trying to, put the message out there, and also meet with anyone during our office hours. We already have a couple scheduled with some private firms that will be hoping to implement ZE infrastructure projects, as well as local jurisdictions that are looking to partner with them. So if there are any kind of lingering questions, especially specific ones, we'll be, as much of a resource as we can.
All right, thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Matthew. Ken, do we have any more questions?
We do have one more question from Angel Pyle, Caltrans. The question is, will the zero emission throughput methodology be added to the performance measure methodology guidebook?
Will zero emission throughput? I don't think we're proposing a zero emission throughput criteria. And so Angel, do you want to maybe come off mute and ask me, is this kind of a follow-up question to what you previously typed in about?
Yes and no. I think there is, let me just look it up because I'm toggling between one screen. And hi, everyone. My name is Angel Pyle. I'm the Senate Bill 1 program manager for the department. So there's some of the specific evaluation criteria that's a zero emission truck throughput. And that one's separate from the first metric. So that was the one that was specifically we were looking at or thinking about a standard methodology, because the range of a 0% utilization and an 80% utilization is a pretty wide span. And I think that part of the industry here is so new that there may not be a standard. So like we've been in some conversations where maybe a different rate, maybe it's like 35 or 40% might be standard or more in alignment with what's expected. But somebody could easily say, oh, it's, we anticipate 80% utilization, and then all of the numbers sound better, but that may not be the right selected measure, if you will, or the right assumption. And I know a lot of this is evolving very quickly and rapidly as this industry is coming online. But we're just wondering if maybe some more standardization or maybe more conversations on that particular evaluation criteria might be good.
Yeah, so first, Angel, thank you for clarifying. I just needed to scroll down a couple pages to see exactly what you're referring to. I would say if Caltrans has any suggestions, or if any of our partners have any suggestions, that's, I think these are just kind of some draft ideas. I know that the prior program manager for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, Hannah Walter, I think had developed some of these ideas during her tenure here over the course of her experience working on this program. So we're really kind of putting this out to see if it is flawed, if it can, if we should scratch any of these altogether, change any of them around. And I would say, Angel, if you can take this framework back,
Absolutely.
to your team, and you can either turn some feedback over to us directly, or we can have a conversation about it. And the same goes for any of our participants on the line. But just with full transparency, if we do plan on making any changes to this document, we'll talk about it in our next workshop with the group. And then obviously anything that's going to be proposed in our draft guidelines will be published well in advance of commissioners hearing it at a commission meeting, so that we can also go through a kind of a public comment period, if you will, with some of this stuff.
Of course. Yeah, we would be happy to provide some additional insight. There are some folks involved in these types of things that are way smarter than me and know way more about these matters than I do, and also collaborate with both CARB and also the Energy Commission. And so there's a lot of expertise in those agencies as well that we coordinate with on this, as this industry is rapidly evolving. So we'd be happy to bring some information back and provide as much supplementary items that are needed to help all of this move forward and help the program.
Thanks, Angel.
I see one more hand raised. Marissa, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
Hi, yes, thank you, Marissa Wu with the Green Lining Institute. Thank you so much for putting on this workshop. I just had a quick comment. I appreciate that one of TCEP's stated goals is to reduce adverse community and environmental impacts of freight. And we know that the legacy of redlining means that low-income communities of color disproportionately are shouldering the health impacts of pollution, leading to chronic health conditions and premature deaths. In order to mitigate those impacts, we urge you all to consider limiting highway expansion projects in these highly disadvantaged and pollution-burdened communities. That could be defined through existing tools like CalEnviroScreen. We are also very concerned about meeting the urgency of the moment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California. We know that in 2022, I think about 10% of TCEP funds were awarded to zero emission infrastructure projects. And so we also really want to urge the Commission to set guidelines to increase funding zero emissions and electric rail infrastructure to a level of something like 50%, just given the urgency to address climate change and align with state priorities. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. We certainly appreciate the feedback. I think we're really hoping and I say this as a commission staff member, we're hoping that we have more interest in funding ZE infrastructure projects in TCEP. I think you mentioned 50%. I think if we would have funded all the ZE projects in cycle 3, we probably would have been maybe around 20 or 25%. So the interest wasn't there in cycle 3. We'll see if it is in cycle 4. But I do, the commission has a stance on wanting to, support the transition to medium and heavy duty zero emission infrastructure. Obviously, it was one of our recommendations in our 671 Clean Freight Corridor Efficiency Assessment this past December. So yes, we hear you loud and clear. And for those projects that that are going to be built, on system or on local roads or on rail. The desire is to do it in the cleanest and most sustainable way possible. And as we mentioned earlier, hopefully in ways that can route traffic or keep heavy trucks out of residential neighborhoods. So we appreciate the comment.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm not seeing any more questions or hands raised, but I'll just give it a second, see if anyone has any more feedback for our proposed topics for future workshops, or any topic really. We have the time to go over them. Okay, Ken, we can go to the next slide, please. So just another 2024 office hours reminder for everyone. Thank you to those of you who have already signed up. For TCEP, we officially kicked them off this week. So we're excited to meet with all of our stakeholders who have signed up for them so far. There is still some availability. You can find the link to sign up on our TCEP workshop or TCEP webpage, excuse me. And if you have an interest in the other SB1 programs, they also have the link on their web pages, and we can also do a multi-funded office hour if needed. So again, these are just scheduled 30-minute appointments with CTC staff. They're reserved on a first-come, first basis. These are closed virtual sessions, one-on-one time with us to answer questions about specific projects or the application process. We will not use the sessions to discuss guidelines development. And again, information can be found on our website. So please go sign up for it if you're interested so that we can schedule you a session and get it on the calendar. Next slide, please, Ken. Okay, so now we're at the time for our workshop to just take any general questions or comments if you have them. Happy to go back to the matrix if needed. I'll pause here and give everyone some time. Okay. Next slide, please, Ken. Just some action items that came from this workshop. We got some comments regarding emphasizing the type of chargers in the matrix that we are considering. Thanks to Joe Sullivan, who gave us the EVITP information for the certification. The link is in everyone's chat. We touched on the challenges of zero emission projects. Thank you to Scott for bringing that up. And talking about the zero emission truck throughput criteria. So thank you to Angel. And I think that was all that came out from this for some topics that we touched on. And again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have feedback after this call on the matrix or the workforce development language, any of the topics that we touched on today. Feel free to give myself, Matthew, or Ken a phone call or an email. Our next scheduled TCEP workshop as of now will be April 10th from 1 to 3. And then again, just a plug for SB1 Equity Workshop, which is March 27th from 1 to 4. Matthew put the save the date for that in the chat also, and you can find it on our website too. So please register for that to get that on your calendar. We can go, oh, Matthew, go ahead. I see your hand raised.
I don't, I just like raising my hand. No, actually, I did have something to say. So, and this, I'm gonna just speak for each of the SB1 teams. I know we have a good amount of audience members on right now. I would say we're tentatively planning to have the next TCEP workshop on April 10th from 1 to 3. That is also the day right before, I believe that's the day right before our joint commission CARB meeting on that Thursday. So maybe put a hold on your calendar, but do not consider it confirmed until you see a save the date come out from us. We are trying to work around all of our SB1 workshops and a lot of other commission events, and we know that a lot of you also have busy schedules, so we're trying to point you towards these times as early as we can, but just understand April 10th is probably still tentative, and we'll confirm as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you for that info, Matthew. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Ken. Here's our contact information. Again, feel free to send us an email or give us a phone call if you have any feedback on any of the topics we touched on today. I'll do one last shout out for any questions or comments that you might have, and just pause here for a second. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we will see you on a future workshop.